It is a rather interesting time in Indian cricket. We recently got all out for 46 in the first test match against New Zealand, even against Bangladesh in the first test in Chennai. The morning session did seem to cause a lot of problems for the Indian batters, and it is at times like this that we often wonder, does India need that old fashioned test batter who can just grind out the fast bowlers and the new ball for the first hour and then capitalize once the sun is up? Now, of course, the kind of batsman I'm talking about has obviously diminished over the years. If you go around world cricket, there are very few batsmen now who look to bide their time, give the first start to the bowler, and then come out on top once the ball has lost a bit of shine. The case for India is no different. The only one I can think of in recent years who was of that mold was Cheteshwar Pujara. And what better time than now to talk about someone like a Cheteshwar Pujara, especially when you know that something like the Border Gavaskar Trophy is around the corner. So then the question is, can Cheteshwar Pujara make a comeback? Now, of course, before we get into this video, I need you guys to go and subscribe. We do these kinds of videos every Tuesday. We also have videos on Friday where we talk about cricket. So yeah, subscribe. Now, of course, before we get into the video and make a case for Cheteshwar Pujara's comeback, it's important to understand the kind of batsmen that India are currently missing in their batting order. And something I can think of right away is a batter who can bide their time, who can respect the bowlers and can then come back in the second half or in the second hour when the new ball has lost its shine. Not only that, you also need a batter who can play spin, who can accumulate the runs and take the attack to the opposition. And Pujara is someone who kind of fits this exact bill, right? Right from his early days, Cheteshwar Pujara was known to be the kind of batter who would take the attack to the spinners especially, and also someone who would be very confident in his defense. Not only that, he was also a very great user of his wrists and was able to manipulate the spinners with great ease. This is something that today only Sarfaraz Khan has seemed to show in this current Indian batting order, and obviously it will not do any harm to India to have one such batsman like that. Even the stats show the same picture, right? In 165 innings where he's been dismissed, only 53 times has he been dismissed against a spinner. And Pujara's overall career average against spin is 46.11, but this is despite the fact that in his last 5 years where he was not performing that well, his average had drastically dropped to 37.5. And of course, Pujara's contributions go way beyond the runs that he scored. It's also the sheer amount of time that he spent at the crease. This is something that we will also get into, but this man, very simply put, just loved to bat. And on the subject of him loving to bat, Pujara spent 23,000 minutes at the batting crease. That's roughly about 2 hours every time that he came out to bat. And amongst the top Indian batters of this generation in the last 15 years, I ran a comparison to see if Pujara has faced the most balls per innings, and of course the stat is as you expected. Amongst the Indian batsmen that you see here, Pujara has faced 98.28 balls per dismissal, and he's ahead by some margin. The second person on this list is a Virat Kohli, who has faced 87.29 balls per dismissal. And of course, as you go lower and lower, there's a drastic drop. When you come down to KL Rahul, it's already at 63.82 balls per dismissal. We also compared him to batsmen in the world for that same period when Pujara was actively playing test matches, and he features at number 5 in this list as well. And of course, I'm going to discount Joe Root from this list because of the simple number of large innings that he's played in this period. But even then, Pujara clearly is someone who's played a large number of balls, and this definitely seemed to have an impact when India were out there batting, scoring all of those runs. And I'm bringing these stats up to emphasize the fact that Pujara is someone who not only scored his own runs but also spent a lot of time out in the middle, something that we'll also look at as partnership data to give you an idea of how important Pujara being out there for the Indian team was. Have a look at this partnership data. For instance, Pujara has been involved in 44 stands of 100 runs or more across 391 partnerships, which means that every 8.88 partnerships that he had, Pujara was out there and getting more than 100 runs along with his batting partner. And with all of these partners combined, Pujara has occupied the crease for 16,258 runs, which was 30.19% of all the runs that India scored during this period of Test cricket. And these are very insane numbers. If you put it simply, that means that Pujara was out there for almost 1/3 of Indian team's entire batting runs. And this is made all the more significant when you think of the fact that India had batsmen at this time like Virat Kohli, Ajinkya Rahane, Murli Vijay, KL Rahul, Rohit Sharma, all of these guys getting big runs consistently. And of course, when you think of some of the iconic innings that Pujara has played over the years, there's a lot of centuries that will stand out, especially the 3 centuries that he got in the Border Gavaskar Trophy in 2018-19. But even apart from that, just some of the crucial 50s that he's got are something that I have to talk about. Firstly, obviously, is the 92 he scored of 221 deliveries at Bangalore, in that Border Gavaskar Trophy in 2017 where Australia were going hell for leather against India. And apart from this, Pujara was also a player who was dropped multiple times, but each time he did come back and he made a strong statement when it came to Test cricket. One of these innings that stands out is a 145 not out against Sri Lanka way back in 2015 in that series where Virat Kohli was captain. Pujara opened the innings with KL Rahul and was able to bat all the way through when no other batsman apart from Amit Mishra even crossed 30. And if this wasn't enough, Pujara has also scored a lot of crucial half centuries like the 72 of 208 deliveries at Trent Bridge in 2018 that eventually helped India win that test match. And of course, his BGT heroics even in 2021 are something that will be talked about a lot. And just to put into perspective how important it is to occupy the crease, in the test match in Gabba, Pujara scored just 56 runs, but he was at the crease for 201 deliveries, which meant that he put up partnerships with Gill as well as Pant and ensured that these two were able to attack, take the game to the opposition, and eventually meant that India were able to win that famous test match. And here I'm only talking about Pujara's famous innings. He has got hundreds in England, Australia as well as South Africa. So by no means is he a batter who lacks the ability to score big runs and in foreign conditions either. When you see a resume of a batter like this, you will seldom think of dropping them, especially the kind of player that Pujara is and the value that he brings to this team. And I can understand why a lot of people out there are asking for Pujara to be back. He's scoring heaps and heaps of runs, not just in the Ranji Trophy but also in the county cricket that he plays. And so it's understandable why a lot of people think that Pujara should make a comeback into that Indian team. However, let's also look at another aspect of Pujara's career, specifically speaking the period after 2018 where he seemed to really start struggling. This was a period where Pujara's numbers overseas did drop a bit, but more surprisingly his numbers at home dropped drastically. And even more than just the numbers itself, it was the manner of these dismissals. It was how tentative Pujara was looking at the crease, and this is something that we'll also get into in a bit. And while we're talking about 2018, here are his stats on either side of that year, and you'll see that in the first 54 test matches that he played from 2010 to 2017, he has an average of 52.96. He's got 14 hundreds, whereas if you come to the 2018 to 23 period, which is the last 5 years of his career, he's played 49 test matches where he's got an average of just 34.13 and he's only got 5 centuries. Now put simply, that means that in the first part of his career, Pujara was getting 100 every 6.4 innings, whereas in the last 5 years of his career, he was getting a century only once every 17.2 innings. That's a 3-time increase, and even then he was given an extremely long rope, but he was not able to repay the faith of the selectors. Now he did have a brilliant Border Gavaskar Trophy down under in 2018-19, but barring that and a series against Bangladesh, Pujara did not play a single test series where his average was above 40. And of course, because of all of this, there was a lot of discussion around what could have possibly gone wrong. And there's one thing that stands out and is common across a lot of articles, and that's Pujara's collapsing back leg whenever he was trying to attempt a front foot shot. Now to just touch upon what a collapsed back leg is, essentially when a batsman is committing to the front foot or playing any front foot shot or a forward defense, you'll see that their back leg is extended, whereas in the case of Pujara, his back foot is not completely extended. In fact, it is slightly bent, and this is what essentially a collapsed back leg is. Now this is something that Pujara had for his entire career, so it was not something that was new, and in a lot of ways this helped him early on in his career and also in the subcontinent, because having a collapsed back leg meant that Pujara's hands were always low and he was able to tackle balls in the subcontinent that were particularly keeping low. However, in the second part of his career, which also coincided with a lot of foreign tours, which meant that the ball was bouncing a lot more, you will have seen a lot of dismissals where Pujara was constantly getting hit on the shoulder of his bat and getting caught either at short leg or at slips or backward point. And of course, the reason why he started to have this as a vulnerability was not particularly known. What I think is it came down to him just aging and him struggling a bit more to reach the pitch of the ball because he was not using his feet as much anymore, be it to spinners or fast bowlers. It basically meant that instead of exposing just one edge of the bat, he was now exposing his inside edge and outside edge, and also fending for balls just outside the off. You'll see, especially in the series in South Africa in 2018, Pujara was getting out to a lot of balls that were coming into him and were catching the shoulder of his bat and getting him caught at short leg. At the same time, you'll also see a lot of dismissals where Pujara is just stuck on the crease, and it almost feels like he's poking on a ball just outside the off stump and getting edged and being caught either at backward point or in the slips or just by the keeper. And also a thing that started to happen post 2018 is Pujara used to get out a lot of times between the scores of 0 and 10. In fact, if you look at the pre-2018 era, Pujara got out for a duck just thrice, whereas if you compare that to post-2018, Pujara got out for a duck 9 times. And that's not all. Pujara started getting out a lot in his first 10 runs. It went from 16 in the pre-2018 era to 29, which is almost double in the post-2018 era. And simply put, this meant that Pujara was a lot more tentative at the start of his innings. He was struggling to decide whether or not to go on the front foot or the back foot when it came to playing deliveries that were just around the off stump and goodish length. And this eventually meant that Pujara got out earlier more often and his average continued to dip and dip. Now, of course, these are his technical flaws and the reason itself why he was dropped right after the World Test Championship in 2023. Apart from his struggles and loss of form, another thing that now is not in the favor of Pujara is his age itself. Now, Pujara over the years has had multiple knee injuries and in general his knees are very dodgy. He's not someone who's the quickest on the field, and this is another factor that the selectors would definitely take into account while trying to pick someone like a Pujara. He's not the swiftest on the field, and in a series like the Border Gavaskar Trophy where the smallest things make a difference, Pujara would now be a liability on the field. And this would also be seen as a backward step, especially when you know that there are so many batters coming through the ranks. You want to reward them for the kind of Ranji performances they've been putting in. Sure, by no means am I saying that the domestic bowlers and the runs you score against them can necessarily convert into big runs in the Australian series. Now, of course, take the example of someone like a Sarfaraz Khan who scored heaps and heaps of runs in domestic cricket, and there's every chance that he can go to Australia and do exactly the same thing. However, this scope for comparison is definitely not something that's linear, especially because of the insane quality difference between the domestic bowlers and the bowlers that India will be facing at the Border Gavaskar Trophy. And this again is another reason why I would not go ahead and pick Pujara. Sure, he's been scoring heaps of runs at the domestic level, but this is not something that will translate at the Border Gavaskar Trophy. And if anything, Pujara would have been picked at least for the India squad that is going to Australia if the selectors had him in mind for the Border Gavaskar Trophy. So in short, definitely Pujara has been a great servant for Indian Test cricket, and there are going to be very few batsmen like him in the years even to come. Despite all of this, I do think that Pujara has served his time, and it's time for the selectors to give a look into the next generation of Indian batters and see what they can bring to the table. Now, this has been our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, definitely share it with your friends. We also have all of our links in our description. We have an Instagram, we have Twitter, we also write a blog, so definitely go check it out. And yeah, thanks for watching.